Кремль без всякого
The
сомнения.
Kremlin definitely, no doubt, it is afraid of the Ukrainian drones, and Ukrainian drones present a real danger in the eyes of the Kremlin today. And yet the claim or the statement by the unnamed European sources, European intelligence sources, that Shoigu and his compatriots or some other allies within their leagues are plotting against Putin, are plotting conspiracy, is a laudable story as far as we're concerned, and all the people close to me. I mean, we find legitimacy. But I think he's physically scared for his life, because what the Ukrainian drones have demonstrated is their ability to strike unexpectedly. And the second thing is the plummeting popularity rating of Putin. Obviously, he's worried about it, because his power rests on two pillars. On the one hand, it is the propaganda creating popularity for him, and the other one is the intelligence services. So the propaganda machine, if it fails, creates a very dangerous situation for Putin, because he rests, or his power rests only on the support of the security or intelligence services. And in fact, in that case, they might even eat him alive. That would be a very dangerous.
Путинская элита
Putin's elite is so close to Putin, so much depends on him, that no real uprising on the part of the elite against Putin is possible. And yet there is a new elite that has emerged over the past 4 years of the war. But this elite that has emerged during the war is already unhappy about what's happened. They're unhappy with the war. Russian society is unhappy with the war, and that is impacting Putin's rating. But I think what they don't like about it is something you might not find very palatable. What they don't like is the fact that Putin cannot put an end to the war on their terms. What are their terms? Well, they want the war to be victorious. Of course, propaganda would position the victory in their own way, but what they want Putin to do is to defeat Ukraine.
способны закончить войну на их условиях. Кремль использует
The Kremlin uses the heroic images of the Great Patriotic War, which is the Second World War in Russia, which is very important for Russian history, for Russian psyche, for Russian people, in order to create an image for themselves. So what the Kremlin is trying to do is use the heroic deeds of the Great Patriotic War and apply it to themselves, but they're not doing it very successfully.
ну уж хотя бы
The
пытались.
very least fact is that Ukraine was part of that picture.
Great.
So Putin has done a lot to create this impression. And in fact, the very way he waged the campaign, the military operation against Ukraine, he has orchestrated it the way that, calls for comparisons with Hitler's Germany. Yes, the regime has lots of traits, lots of characteristics that resemble Hitler's Germany. But to put Hitler and Putin on the par would be, I'm not even sure whether that would be a compliment to Putin, because Hitler really was a global villain. But when you look at Putin, he's a villain, of course, but on a different level, much lower.
Владей уровнем пониже. В России есть свой пример.
Well, Russia has got its own example, Stalin, who actually ended his life in the pool of his own vomit, because nobody dared to approach him when he, when he collapsed. So I think this is the route that Putin is following now. This is the direct route to that kind of end to his life. The scale of repressions under Putin is about 100 times less than under Stalin. However, the propaganda creates the impression that has a very similar impact on Putin's elite that it had on Stalin's elite.
Которую он создает на элиты, очень похожа на то. Не хочу быть оптимистом.
I don't want to be that optimist who says, oh, God will help us and everything will be fine. Well, unfortunately, I think it's quite likely that Putin will stay in power for another 5, 7, or even 10 years. I don't think he'll go beyond that.
Вот все эти годы будет продолжаться.
So all these years will be in a state of a Cold War, and our joint task is not to allow it to turn into a hot war. And for that, we need to do two things. One is to work with Russian society, and that's what we do. And second one is to allow or to make sure that Europe is not so defenseless as it is now. So basically, that community see the UK as their main opponent, as the very biggest force that opposes Russia at the moment. I don't know why they have actually focused on the UK, why they have chosen the UK as their main enemy, but that is the case. Whereas my perception of the UK is this kind of image of a person having a nice time in his garden or her garden and drinking something quite weak, non-alcoholic, not even whiskey.
Виски, а что-то безалкогольное.
Well, of course, Putin at the moment doesn't appear to be very predictable, but there are ways to predict his actions, however. And I have been talking about it for years now. Putin is a gangster, and he sees a weakness in his opponent as an invitation to attack them.
Слабость, как приглашение канайки.
So Putin sees Europe as a very weak opponent because he knows that the defense spending in the whole of Europe, including the United Kingdom, is much less than defense spending in Russia. He also knows that the European army is very weak and without Americans wouldn't be able to defeat Russia. And he sees that American army are not going to be waging campaigns against Putin on behalf of Europe. Well, I think quite likely the war will stop very close to the front line where the troops are currently positioned. So what we see today is that Russia is incapable at the moment to move on, and Ukraine is incapable of counter-attacking. And I think this will be the case for some time to come. There was a dangerous point when Ukraine was running out of resources, but now that the Europeans have decided to allocate 90 billion euros to Ukraine, I think in the next year and a half, nothing is going to change. And I think in 2027, the very fact that the front line is not going to budge very far will probably lead us to the situation when the war will have to stop.